Moving on to our next game, the second semifinal, we had Washington and Texas, of course, 2 versus 3. This one was more of a high scoring game, very obviously. 37-31. This one ended up with Washington getting the dub over Texas. Made a big play on the last play of the game, knocking the ball away for a potential game-winning touchdown. Washington, they move on to the national championship. They'll be facing Michigan next week.
Yeah, this was a really good game, a really good high-scoring game. Texas gave Washington a scare because Washington was up pretty big. I mean, they were up 10 going into the fourth quarter. Texas would then score 10 to bring that back. But Washington was able to hold on, get a small 6-point victory against a pretty scrappy Texas Longhorns team who started out slow, but heated up and answered everything that was thrown at them. They went in to halftime all tied up, of course. This was just a really good game. So we will look at it on paper here, of course, at first. Michael Penix Jr. had a great season as a passer, had an amazing semifinal game as a passer. 29 for 38, 430 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, rushed for 31 yards. Just a really, really solid game for him. He was second on his team in rushing and was actually not too far behind Dylan Johnson, who led the ground game with 49 yards, got himself 2 touchdowns. So Johnson and Penix have been a pretty big part of this Washington season all year, our Washington team all year. They've been influential in the success of this team. Johnson, unfortunately, suffered an injury towards the end of the game that would actually do some stuff with the time that gave Texas such a chance to come back. It allowed them to have some more time because of the forced injury timeout. Texas would have some more, about 45 seconds instead of like what would probably have been 15. So definitely put Washington in a scarier place. Also put it in the scariest place because if they do win, does Johnson come back? As of today, it does seem like Washington coaches believe that Johnson will be fine for the Natty. So we'll see where that goes from here. Rome Odunze had a great game. Jalen Polk had a great game. They both led the way in the air with just 3 yards separating the two of them. 125 yards for Odunze, 125 yards for Jalen Polk. Great games for the both of them. Polk was able to snag a touchdown, and then Jalen McMillan also got 58 yards and a touchdown as well. The Washington offense, especially in the air, firing on all cylinders. Ground game, not usually super big for Washington, but obviously Johnson does just about what he did in every game. Raylan Goforth and Asa Turner were able to recover Texas fumbles, and that was pretty big for the defense. The other big defensive thing for Washington in this game was going to be obviously getting a stop on the last play of the game, getting a stop on the last few plays of the game to try to make sure Texas does not come away with the win here. For Texas, Quinn Ewers started out slow, started like 0 for 4. From there, he heated up for sure. I mean, his completion rate stayed pretty rough, but he had a good game nonetheless. 24 for 43, 318 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks, 54 rushing yards. He was third on his team. Texas's running game was pretty on fire in this one. C.J. Baxter led that ground game with 64 yards, got himself a touchdown. Jaden Blue was just behind him with 59 yards. He got himself a touchdown. And then Byron Murphy also was able to score a touchdown. He had 1 yard on the day, but you can't really fault him for anything like that. He did what he needed to do, came in, punched a touchdown in, and kept Texas alive. Jatavion Sanders and Jordan Whittington led the way in the air with 75 and 70 yards respectively. They had a pretty good day. Adonai Mitchell, favorite target of Quinn Ewers, led the way with the scoring. He caught the only air touchdown for Texas. And then Maurice Blackwell Jr. recovered a Jeremy Bernard fumble. Texas in this one went down, as I said, pretty early, fought back. Washington started out with this massive pass that was just almost a touchdown, but not quite. And then it was punched in by Dylan Johnson. It was a 77-yard bomb from Penix. And then from there, it's looking like things are going to get out of hand. Texas had a pretty rough first drive, but they would score and then force Washington to punt, and then Texas would punt. Then they started trading blows. It would go from 7-7 to 14-7 to 14-14 to 21-14 to being 21-21 at the half. From there is when it seemed like it would get a little out of hand. As Washington went up 28-21, Texas fumbled. Washington got a field goal to make it 31-21, and it seemed like they would be able to hold on to it. But Texas fought back, made it kind of a scary game. We get to the last drive. Washington was forced to go 3 and out and try to hold off Texas, and they get, of course, as I said, get that extra time because of the injury timeout, and they make a solid advance down the field, getting all the way to the Washington 13. But from there is when their hopes and dreams kind of fall apart as they go incomplete pass, incomplete pass, incomplete pass, and that is the game. Matter of fact, that one of those incomplete passes seemed like the game was over, and the refs were like, no, put 1 second left back on the clock. There's still time. So Texas gets one more shot. They had a pretty creative play call, a good pass, look to the outside, but Mitchell just couldn't quite get up and get it. The defender got all over him, and that was it. Washington held on and went on to the championship. I've been obviously pushing the Michael Penix agenda all year, so I was happy to see this result. This was a great game. I wouldn't have been too upset about either of these teams advancing, but I'm happy to see Michael Penix and the Huskies move forward, especially under a 430-yard passing performance from Penix. Just a great game.
Yeah, I mean, we said this when we were doing our picks. Like, this game is probably going to be higher scoring. This was pretty much what we expected. I mean, it was 21-21 at halftime, and that's when I had to tap out. Like, my God, I didn't realize that this game was. I didn't realize when I woke up and saw like this game went to 1 o'clock. So I had to
Yeah.
watch the second half back. But it is what it is. What I did see live and what I did see later, still a great game. Um, like again, it's pretty much what we kind of expected. Like both teams really being able to score. Now Texas, like you mentioned, third quarter, they didn't score anything. And if we're being honest here, Washington probably could have dropped, I don't know, 20 something in the third quarter, I should say. Like if they had actually been able to finish drives, once they got good field
Yeah.
position, because they had two fumbles. Texas had two fumbles. Their first drive out of the half, they had a fumble. Instead of being able to get a touchdown, Washington only able to get a field goal out of it. Texas defense clamped down, forced the field goal. So that's a situation where they could have got a touchdown instead, made it worse. And then a long drive, 12-play drive for Washington on the next drive, just a field goal again. So it's like you could have easily gone up a whole lot more there. Again, you could have had three straight touchdown drives if you're able to finish. And if the Texas defense hadn't been able to hold like it did, and the penalty obviously set them back on that third down, um, down at the start of the fourth quarter. And then you had another fumble, which at first, watching the replay, I was like, how did they not see that that was very obviously the ball literally like flowed out of his hand. Now, like they didn't get the recovery until the ball was on the ground. It was like under somebody and everything, but like the ball very clearly like literally just popped out of his hand like before. But they fixed it, got the fumble recovery, and then they punted. And then their next drive again, long drive, 10 for 65 yards, took 5 minutes off the clock. Defense once again clamped down, only allowed a field goal. It's like this game very well could have been over very early on, easily. Because like with how evenly matched it was in the first half, like you kind of expected more of that. But second half, Texas really couldn't do anything. And then you have Washington. If they had just been able to finish a couple of those drives with touchdowns, like this game would have been over. And you wouldn't have the situation, like you said, where Texas could have scored on that last play in the end zone, and Texas would be in the championship right now instead of Washington. But with that being said, you have to give all the credit in the world to Michael Penix Jr. I mean, he like this wasn't even that crazy of a game for him, to be honest with you. Like, which is hilarious to say, like 430 yards, two touchdowns, but it wasn't that insane by Michael Penix standards. So again, you have to give all the credit in the world to him. Like he played great. Dylan Johnson, he did get injured on that play late in the fourth quarter, and that is partially why they were able to get the ball back because, of course, stop the clock there. He's going to be back for the championship. They're saying right now, which is good because obviously they're going to need him. And that one, obviously, you're going up against a better defense in Michigan than you did against Texas, but he didn't have the best game, but again, the injury late in that one, but they didn't really need the running game. Like this one was pretty much all go quarterback duel in this one. Still ran the ball pretty, overall well, but Texas was a lot better on the ground, 180 yards, and they spread it around pretty well on the ground as well. So this one really just it came down to just really those plays in those certain situations. Like again, if they had been able to score like a touchdown on any of those drives, or even the drive where they had the punt, um, like the not the last one, but the one before Texas finally got that touchdown, like the game could have been over. And I think at that point, that's kind of when it showed like, okay, Texas, as good as they were this season, and I mentioned, hey, Oklahoma, it took them a last second score for them to win and beat Texas. Like Washington, it's still definitely a slight level above Texas. We saw that when they beat Oregon for the second time. And I think that's just kind of what happened in this game when they finally started to pull away. And they were able to make plays at the very end. Texas was like literally this close to getting a touchdown. Didn't happen. But yeah, this one was a really good game. Again, I wish I'd been able to just experience it and completely live, but it is what it is, I guess. Usually these games are on Saturday or Friday at least, but this time around they have on Monday. So, but regardless, definitely a great game, and again, kind of what we expected here. Like Texas, really good team this year, but Washington is just simply better.
Yeah, I think that pretty much boils it down. I don't think I have too much more to add to that one other than I think that Texas just played a really, really good game. And then some fun, less than sports analysis. I'm obviously the Sugar Bowl was played in New Orleans, and I was in the city myself last night, and I saw a lot of Washington fans out and about in the city having a good time. I did not see a single Texas fan, so that is a little unfortunate. The game was not that bad. It's not something to hang their heads over. Texas played a hell of a game in this one. I mean, they came out and a little slow, but kept up with Washington, even fought back from a 10-point deficit, which, of course, I agree. If Washington could have kind of locked in on some of those drives, we could have had a much, much different scenario of a game here. I mean, in the second half, Washington scores a touchdown immediately, but then you get field goal, punt, field goal, punt. And there's much more chance if you turn any of those field goals into a touchdown. This game's out of reach for the Longhorns. So Texas played a good game. Their defense locked in and tried to hold one of the highest flying offenses down and be sure they didn't get into the end zone, and they did. Their only issue was that they couldn't get it past Washington's defense there at the end. So good game for these two teams. I think that regardless of the fact that Texas has not won the Natty, Terrence and I can probably say and agree that Texas is back without too many major changes. I think that we could see Texas having a good season next year as well.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the 12-team playoff too, like you're going to get more opportunities for teams that I never want to say 1 year wonder because Texas is a really good team, but like a team that comes out of sort of nowhere, maybe 1 year, like has a really good season, exceptional season. They don't have as good of a one next year. Like even if Texas, loses one more game next season, like obviously not being the SEC, like conference championships and all that, like it's going to be a little bit different. But even if they lose one more game, like they could still easily make it to the playoffs, depending on how everything else turns out. Because this year, I feel like was sort of kind of outlier with like every conference champion either being undefeated or having one loss. Like I don't remember the last time that
Yeah.
happened. Like it didn't like, and especially them all being in like the top five, right? So like that just doesn't happen. So even if Texas like has a slight drop off going to SEC, like I doubt it. I mean, it did still beat Bama, and Bama's going to be better next year. But I think Texas, we can see them right back here next year. Quinn Ewers, he's good. Like he's going to be even better next year. I expect. Eventually, I guess they'll get Arch Manning in there at some point. But like if he doesn't wait around, like I think they'll still be fine because if Quinn comes back, they should be good. So I just think at the end of the day, like we've been saying, like Washington is just slightly better there, and they proved it. Came out with that dub.